Hello, everyone. Welcome to Human Resources Management Unit number 7. In Unit number 7, we'll be talking about separating and retaining employees. We're going to talk about a little bit of how employees quit or we fire them and how we plan to retain them. So let's start. First, in this video, I want you to look at the example of how IBM has pushed out older workers unfairly, if we want to put it that way. But I mean, we have to understand that they do have a strategy to fulfill. They need to remain in business, and when it comes to technology companies, it's very difficult to thrive right now because there's too much competition. Innovation is coming from many areas, many sites, many companies, and of course they are trying to do their best. If we see it from the human resources management perspective, obviously it's not good because we're talking that employees start to be very scared about working for this company because it's like first there's rolling heads and then probably mine is next. So when that happens, employees usually don't feel good and they start to underperform. Okay, so I want you to watch that video. It's not too long. I think it's like 6 minutes, but I think it's a very, very good example of what companies do sometimes. Okay, so we have to, when we're talking about retaining employees, we need to understand who is a high performer, who is a low performer, how we retain them, how to praise them, etc. Right? So we have here organizations with low turnover and satisfied employees tend to perform better, and I agree with that statement. Personally, whenever I started working for companies, I didn't care much what other employees' tenure has been. But nowadays, whenever I apply for companies, I try to look and see how long other employees have been working there. For example, I give you the example of this university. I know this university, when I started, I looked in professors have been there for 10, 15 years, 20 years. And that means something. That means they're happy. They're happy with what they're doing. They're happy with their job, with the benefits or whatever it has to be. So that means it's good. Yet when I looked at another university, I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to tell you their name. Tenure was like 1, 2 years, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, tops 3. What's happening there? Well, that means something. That means that probably their human resources policy or employees are not suitable or fit, right? So let's talk about two things. First of all, involuntary turnover and voluntary turnover. So involuntary turnover happens when is initiated by the employer. It means they are not performing very well and we fire them. And then the other one, we have the voluntary turnover, which is by the employee. They feel that maybe the organization doesn't suit their needs or so, and then they quit, right? So involuntary turnover, it happens sometimes, like let's say the employee has a bad action or they stole something or they did something very, very bad. And of course, we are not forecasting it. And that is a very big problem because whenever we never forecast that we're going to be firing employees. Unless, I mean, it's like there's like a massive restructuration of the company. Yes, in that sense, yes, we will plan it, but originally we don't plan it, right? So in this case, like I said, involuntary turnover is not that complex, but voluntary turnover is more complex than voluntary, because involuntary usually we will say, okay, this employee is not performing well, he's not moving good, so let's try to see if we can push them or push him outside and so on. Okay, very good. So in this case, what happens? The cost associated with the turnover. So in this case, with both, whether it's because we fired employee or because he quit, we have to recruit, select, and that takes time and costs a lot of effort in terms of human resources, times scheduling the interviews, crafting the contracts, finding the right person. Sometimes we cannot find the right person. So that is it. Lost productivity. Involuntary turnover, well, in this one, like I said, it can be that somehow if we fire them, there's gonna be maybe lawsuits. Why? Because they feel it was unfair. Maybe they felt that the action that they did, it was not sufficient to be fired, and that happens, and also can lead also to workplace violence, which, I mean, some employees are not they're not right in their mind, and somehow they react too violently to being fired. So that usually causes some problems. And then of course in the voluntary turnover, that is the other way around. We may lose a lot of talent. Again, they are talented, but maybe as a company we're not offering them what they want. Maybe in terms of money, maybe in terms of development, it can be many areas. So it is bad. Some companies suffer of that they have they attract good talents, but because of the size, they are not able to move them forward, and that happens too. So here we have the employment at will doctrine. So the employment at will doctrine pretty much is very simple. We say that you can keep on working as long as you want. There is no deadline. It's not a year contract. The contract employee is different. Contract employee goes for 1 year. Employment at will is it's open. You wanna quit. But if I wanna fire you, I also can fire you. No, so in this case, it's good for the employee because they feel say security, but in the same time, I mean, yeah, for the company, it's also less productive because whenever you negotiate the contracts, you say, okay, if you work hard, if you do well, I will continue renovating your contract. But if you don't, then I will stop it. So in this kind of employment at will, employees become too complacent. They're like, if I don't work hard or I work hard, I still will be hired. So there's no point in working too hard, right? That happens. That happens often, right? Very good. So we can talk. We're gonna start. Let's move a little bit into employee separation. We gotta start to talk a little bit about problems. So we must have a standardized, systematic approach to discipline and discharge. Mean the same rules and the same system for absolutely everyone. There is no for you. I do it because you're the manager, but not for you because you are the CEO. No, the rules should apply to everyone. Okay. So it should be based on principles of justice and law, and should allow for various ways to intervene. So that means it's not always one-sided, meaning we give the voice to employees, we give voice to people that was involved, to supervisors, people from other department, maybe a different point of view, and that makes decisions more ethic. So we have here some when it comes to separation, we come the three areas that we have in terms of the procedures. So we have the outcome fairness, interactional justice, or procedural justice. So in outcome justice, a judgment that the consequences given to the employee are just. So in this case, we are talking about just fairness. We ensure that there's fairness. We have the interactional justice where we talk to the employees. And I mean, of course, we take a decision based on the rules and regulations that we set up, but we also let them voice out why they did a certain thing. And in this case, it is trying to consider a little bit, maybe employee has been late many times. And then when we talk to them, it's like, okay, based on the regulations, we need to fire you. So maybe if he says, well, I have a very sick son and, this has happened and stuff. And then in this case, perhaps we could think if there's any way to arbitrate that or to change it, to talk to other employees and say whether they feel fair because they know his situation, and then of course that becomes more fair. And then we have procedural justice, a judgment that fair methods were used to determine the consequence an employee receives. On this one, like I said, we have a procedure. There's a way, rules we have to follow, and then of course employee will feel, well, I was fired, but they warned me, they told me, they put it, and then I still didn't follow. So anyways, this is exactly the same thing. Okay, now we have a problems, which is a wrongful discharge. Discharge might not violate an implied agreement. Okay, so in this case, employer had promised job security, action inconsistent with company rules. So in this case, terminating employee for refusing to do something illegal or unsafe. So in this case, I fire them, but it's wrongful because I didn't, as a company, I didn't fulfill with my promises, or I asked them to do something that they didn't want to do. So this one, they can sue the company, right? So that is very tricky and costly. I think it was just last year, Ford or General Motors, I can remember, one of the large ones, I think. And there was an employee who was a Middle Eastern, don't remember also the country, don't ask me exactly. And he complained, he sued the company for a lot of money about discrimination, saying that he was lazy and he didn't do his job, and many racist comments against him. And then he, of course, he quit, he fired, and he made like 20 million, or it was the amount of money that he won on the lawsuit. It was ridiculous because they were able to prove that actually, yeah, his bosses were really discriminating him in so many ways. That doesn't happen in Korea. Here we still don't have so much of that. I mean, it's getting better. Now there's discrimination for women, and then of course between the different positions. Now the law lets us, for example, denounce where there's any abuse or so. That's working very well. So in this case, like I said, also can be discrimination. Maybe employers more make discipline decisions without regard to sex, age. So decisions are all for everyone, and then of course we need to avoid any sort of discrimination. Otherwise, it can be a legal problem. We also talk about employees' privacy. In this case, we need to understand what is private, their private life, and what areas we cannot touch. In this case, let's say, for example, we also talk about search or monitor employees. We can say that nowadays, for example, can I fire an employee because of his social media? Maybe no, I cannot go into his social media, and whatever he posts in there is his social life. But maybe if he is saying something about my company and showing some information about my company, or saying or revealing something that is inside the company, then perhaps I could take a legal action and perhaps I can fire him. But again, I mean, we have to analyze it. The same thing is like, I cannot just go and, if I suspect that one of the employees taking drugs, then I go and search their things and see if I can find something. Of course, I mean, if this is announced and say, okay, we're suspecting that maybe here in the company people is consuming things, so we are gonna do a thorough check and it's within legal rights, then we can do it, right? Very good. So, in this case, whenever we are going to take those actions, like I said, we have to inform the employees. We need to tell them why we're taking a decision to maybe violate, not to say violate their privacy, but I mean, tag into areas or that we wouldn't expect because we're suspecting something, right? Why we suspected, how the red flags appeared, and then, of course, like I said, based on what we find, who we share that information with. That means with higher ranks is like we find out that maybe they are keeping this information or they are doing this illegally, etc. And then of course we take the reasonable actions. Okay, so we have the notification of layoffs. If you're gonna fire someone, you have to tell them in advance. So here the regulations by country may vary. Korea has it. I think when you are in probation, you have only, if you don't have, they don't have to give you any notice, if I don't remember wrongly. I think it's only less than 1 month, if I can't remember wrongly. But once you become an employee, that's a different story. I think by law it's already 3 months, or on cases something very, how to say, evident that they need to fire you as soon as possible, then of course, I mean, that enters into action. But I mean, like I said, every country has its own regulations. So in this case, we have also the progressive discipline. So we have the hot stove rule. So principle of discipline that says that discipline should not be like a hot stove. We have to slowly telling them continuously, and not because it's hot, I fire them. So again, we have to Make sure there's consistent, objective, and immediate consequences. All right, give a clear warning, and of course that comes together with a formal discipline process. And let's go through that. No? So first of all, I mean, this one may vary from company to company. Some companies set the three strikes and you're out. Here actually we technically having one, 2, 3 strikes out plus the unofficial spoken warning. So that means in this case, let's say for example, I realize one of the employee is coming late, and I realized for 1 week he's been late. So I said, okay, you've been late. Maybe you want to check out your attendance. This is already the first warning. Of course, it's documented. We have to document everything about employees. It's very important to document everything because if we have to fire them, we need the proof of it. So maybe in this case, I will have the check card saying that he was being late. And then I said, okay, on 15th of November, I warned him that he's been late, and then he promised to change. Fantastic. So after that comes the written ones, no? And this one already I warned you, so now goes written to you with a letter. There's a proof of it, there's a formal proof of it, and then of course we keep a copy, we document it. The same thing, second reading, warning. Again, in this case, I'm not gonna say threat of temporary suspension. It means like, okay, second warning, it depends on every company's policies and says maybe you have to pay back for the days that you've been late, or I don't know, close a warning. And if you do one more, perhaps that will be means that's the last chance and you're fired. So in this case, again, every company has their own process, but usually it's progressive, meaning that first we let you know nicely, then written, 3, bye, that's all. And we have to document everything. Okay, everything must be on black and white. It's not my voice against your voice, right? Sometimes even if we need a third party to be while writing the letters, that it has to be done. Okay, we need to have evidence, because if companies wants to sue us, we have all the evidence and say, that's it. So in this case, we can have separation for many reasons. We can be like late or not coming, you're not working safely, quality or quantity of work, maybe you just work too little, or perhaps they not fulfilling the quality. Maybe if it's customer service, you're rude to the customers. It could be sexual harassment, maybe to some other employees, maybe impaired by alcohol or drugs, he comes drunk, or I don't know, he comes in an inconvenient state, theft of company property. It could be anything. It could be from some small things to millions of dollars. Then of course cyber slacking, which is also very relatively new. You just sit down and you do nothing except watching your social media, like probably you are doing now while watching my video. Maybe you're also cyber slacking. I don't know. It could be, Okay, so let's look at alternatives for dispute resolution. Okay, so first of all, we have the open door. Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go for open door policy. In this case, we have the open door policy. It's an organization policy of making managers available to hear complaints. Okay, so in this case, that means as a boss, you can come anytime and complain about anyone, right? Maybe I don't have to do any formal complaint. I can come and talk and say, this guy has been stealing some things, and then we hear you, right? And then of course, people come and discuss it. Then we have the peer review process for resolving disputes by taking them to a panel composed of representatives organization. So at same levels as the people in the dispute. So maybe in this case, I call 2 or 3 of your colleagues and I see how is he performing, how's his job, and maybe some of them will say like, he isn't very good, his quality of work is poor, but it's because he's learning. Maybe some other will say like, yeah, he takes some time to learn, but it's not because of that. Like it's maybe his skills are not that good, but he's polishing. So in this case, it gives a voice to other employees to also give their point of view. And then we have the mediation. So in this case, the mediation already, we have maybe someone that complains, an affected person, and the one that created the problem. So somehow we have a mediation. This happened. Okay, tell me your side of the story, and then already the side of the story. Then, of course, in this case, we try to reach a middle part, and then we have the arbitration. Arbitration is already, it comes from someone outside. That means that maybe there's two employees in dispute, or maybe the employee and the boss, and then comes an external, maybe it could be a lawyer, or maybe an institution or a union, and then in this case they will hear the cases and resolve by making a decision. When we do arbitration, already the company and the employee, or the employees, should agree to it, because already it says external, try to take, he listened to the parts, he took a decision, and of course we need to accept it as it is. Okay. Here we're going to talk about employee assistance programs. So in this, whenever, this is not practiced in Korea, but this was like, for example, there's some companies in some other countries that they have departments that help and support employees in many ways. It could be maybe because they are depressed, maybe because they have some problems, and the company offers to help them. The same thing, we have the outplacement counseling. So in this case, we have a service in which professionals try to help dismissed employees manage the transition from one job to another. So in this case, we have services that say, well, actually, also that in here in Korea is not that very common, which is some employees. This one is usually offered by state or by governments, which is once they've been fired, there's this counseling services, and they tell them why you get fired, and then what you have to change in your future, and how we can support you, maybe look for other jobs, train you, etc. Okay, so in this case, we need to talk about employee engagement. So in this case, employees who are engaged and provide a clear competitive advantage to the firm. That means we want employees to be connected to us. And how can they become connected? There's many areas. So in this case, for example, whenever we give them a clear path, what I want you to do and what I offer in return. So in this case, maybe your career will advance, your salary will improve, I'm gonna give you more responsibilities, maybe I'm gonna let you be more creative and be part of certain projects that have a lot of meaning, and then of course I'll give meaning to your career. We're always looking for that. Okay, so of course in this case, like I said, we talk about the job withdrawal, which is a set of behaviors which employees try to avoid the work situation physically, mentally, or emotionally. So in this case, it could be that employees quit because they feel that their job is too stressful, it doesn't work, they don't pay well. It could be the co-workers, it can be so many things, right? And companies not addressing this too well means that there's constant turnover, and that's not good, right? So of course disengagement comes, and the problem with, again, when employee engagement, when we have employees engaged, there's job satisfaction. We pay them well, they make them feel valuable, we tell the employees they are doing their job well, we coach them when they are not doing very well, and then we groom them. The more we groom them, the more engaged we'll be. But if not, it will be job dissatisfaction. So they start to change. They start to act against us. They act against us means maybe they don't perform the job with quality. If it's a customer service, they don't care about the customer. So like I said, nowadays companies are trying to focus a lot on having the employees very happy, because they understand that they are the face of the company, and if you treat them well, they will treat your customers well too. In the case of Costco, for example, Costco has great benefits for their employees and treats them very well, so because they know that ultimately they will provide good service if they treat them well. So again, some of the job dissatisfaction can happen because first of all, personal feelings. It could be maybe something that doesn't fit I don't fit in this job, I don't fit with my colleagues, maybe the tasks and the roles, they ask me to do this, they ask me to supervise this, but actually I'm not supervising anything. Maybe I am just doing some manual jobs. I remember one of my jobs, they wanted me to clean the office too, and I was like, no way. Every Friday they will stop activities and say, "Oh, everybody needs to clean the office." I was like, I was not hired for that. And again, that comes to role ambiguity and conflict or overload. Supervision and co-workers, your bosses are not too good, the managers are not good, and finally pay and benefits, which is you don't get paid well for what you know or what you do or for who you are. You could be a top employee and they don't pay you well, right? So like I said, it happens with the behavior changes. That means people start to feel dissatisfied, unhappy, and then of course, like I said, it could be physical, that they don't come, or psychological, that they start to even bad mouth with other employees. Oh, the company treats me so bad, and they become the black sheep. So they become the rotten apple, and the problem is that rotten apples start to rotten some other apples too. And of course, we have to understand: is it that the apple is rotten by itself, or is the company rottening it? And we have to understand that very well. Okay, so again, in this case, we talked about the job satisfaction. So how can you become happy at work? The values, perception, ideas of what is important. In this case, we need to understand what is important for the employee. Is it the money? Is it the career growth? Is it the learning? It comes at the very different stages for different employees. For some of you young people are very focused on money rather than learning, but actually it should be the other way around. You should focus first on learning and then on the money. Once you are an expert at your job, you can get the money that you want. But anyways, that goes to each one of them. Like I said, in this one, personal dispositions, like I said, it can be how overall you feel satisfied personally. Every person is very different. I have met employees that they don't aspire too much. They just want a stable job. They just want to get an average pay, not overload of work, just come at their time, leave at their time, do their things, personal things. So in this case, job satisfaction is more intrinsic rather than extrinsic. But again, when we start to over squeeze those employees that they were looking just for the middle part, then they don't feel happy. And then, of course, the satisfaction starts to go. So when we talk about this one, we have to monitor job satisfaction. So in this case, we have to understand when we hire them, we have to monitor them, we have to understand, we have to talk to them constantly. That goes together with the evaluations, with the monthly performance evaluations. We also need to talk about how they feel at work. So in this case, we do that. We design their jobs so that they have multitude of things to do. They feel that they are doing something meaningful for themselves, for the company, that they are growing. We have to understand that sharing the values of the company, and then of course pay them well. So again, everything goes together. We make them feel well. We design jobs so that they perform well, etc., etc. Okay. So with this goes together again with the role analysis, right? We need to understand again what are the expectations of the role. The members of roles discuss expectations. We have to understand, for me as a company, what I expect out of you, for you as employee, what can you provide for me? Then we set the rules based on your skills, your abilities, the pay, etc. We already talked about this in units before, which is again the role and the job description. It's based on also what the company needs and what the employee can provide and how much we're gonna do. So like I said, the clearer there is a job, of course, it says you are gonna be checking the quality of X product by doing this. You're gonna be looking at them, examining, putting it in the machine, and then of course checking the quality. That's it. But then what happens if I Inspecting the quality also means, and you have to travel abroad, and you have to stay overtime, and you have to come on weekends, and you have to supervise 3 employees. That is not part of the task and role. So again, comes dissatisfaction because employees are doing way much more and they're not getting paid more. They were just set to pay that. The job initially said, I just need to check the things, and it says it was a role of 9 to 5, but nowadays I'm doing much more and more time. So supervisors and coworkers already talk about it. Again, in this case, we need to set a team that supervisors and coworkers. Supervisors usually will create the culture, which is you create a good culture. Employees are gonna be very satisfied because in the end, you create a culture of being together, work together, move together, and then of course, camaraderie between you, all of them. I have had jobs before that where the bosses were fantastic, and then of course they set the mood for everything, and everybody works with them. Everybody follows them rather than fear them. But I have had jobs where you fear the boss, and that's not good because again, it starts to become very bad environment. People is dissatisfied, they don't want to work hard, and so on. Okay, so like I said, we talk about the pay benefits. We already have talked about all of these ones. Okay, and then of course the monitoring of job satisfaction. This is seldom used in any company, which is, yes, we already set up performance management, but do we ever ask employees how they feel? They want to continue working. What is their career goals? How they want to move? Where they want to move? They want to stay for us with long. We never have that conversation, and it's very critical because the more we understand them, the more we will provide them what they want. But this seldom happens. So anyways, that's all for today. If you have any questions about this unit, please let me know. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next week.